37.6 million ounces do not simply go missing. Metal does not wake up one morning, decide it is bored of sitting in vaults, and walk out the door. Yet over just 47 days, that is exactly what happened inside the Comex vault system. Tons of silver, barcoded, audited, allegedly safe behind reinforced steel and biometric locks, quietly reclassified, withdrawn, or delivered out. On a chart, it looks like a cliff. One moment, a vast sea of metal. The next, a drained basin. Then, at almost the same moment, 4 major South Korean banks, institutions with deep global supply lines, issue a simple, chilling notice: silver sales suspended. No end date. No detailed explanation, just indefinitely. At the same time, Beijing tightens its grip, blocking ordinary Chinese citizens from buying physical precious metals through the banking system. Russia, already cut out of London trading floors, is effectively walled off from Western precious metals markets. You sit there, watching the ticker, and see something that should not exist in a sane, functioning system. Spot silver trading above futures. Backwardation. In simple language, people are more desperate for silver now than for a promise of silver later. The market is screaming that today's metal is worth more than tomorrow's contract. That is not bullishness. That is fear. That is a quiet bank run on the physical market. Screens still glow green and red. Analysts still talk calmly about basis points and chart patterns. But underneath, the plumbing is rattling. Because what you are seeing is not just silver going up. You are watching stage 3 of a 4-stage pattern that has repeated throughout monetary history. The vaults are draining, confidence is cracking, and somewhere, someone large is discovering that the metal they thought they owned exists only as a line item on a screen. The pattern is brutally simple, but almost nobody recognizes it until it is too late. Stage 1 is establishment. A commodity becomes money. Governments stamp it into coins, back their currency with it, and promise convertibility. Silver lives in your pocket, not just in vaults. For decades, prices remain boring and stable. People trust the system because they can literally feel the metal's weight in their hands. In America, silver sits in every coin until the mid-1960s. Walk into a bank with a paper dollar, and you can walk out with silver. No debate, no drama. Stage 2 is manipulation. Someone realizes there is more profit in paper than in metal. 1 ounce of real silver slowly becomes 10 paper claims, then 50, then 100. Futures, options, certificates, unallocated accounts, ETFs. Each line of code claims to represent metal locked safely somewhere far away. The supply looks infinite, the price drifts down, and people are told silver is just another industrial input now. For years, it works. Stage 3 is the squeeze. Demand quietly builds. A few players start asking an uncomfortable question: "I'd like delivery, please." At first, the system accommodates. Bars move, trucks roll, vaults release. Then more people ask. Then industrial users demand priority. Then foreign governments quietly divert shipments. At some point, everyone realizes the same thing at once. There is far less physical metal than paper promises. That moment does not show up as a polite press release. It shows up as backwardation, as vault inventories collapsing, as banks suspending sales. Stage 4 is the break. Trading halts, rules change mid-game, and paper contracts die in a pile of legal fine print and broken expectations. The people who own actual metal ride out the chaos. Everyone else discovers they held promises, not wealth. That is the pattern. Establishment, manipulation, squeeze, break. It has already played out before. And right now, silver is marching through stage 3 in real time, while most people are still arguing about chart patterns on social media. To see how this ends when a small group tries to outrun the system, you have to go back to Texas in the late 1970s. Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt, heirs to an oil fortune, watched inflation tear through America. Double-digit price rises, the end of the gold standard, a dollar that seemed to buy less every month. They reached a conclusion that, in hindsight, made perfect sense. If paper money is dying, real money will win. For them, real money was silver. Not a few coins, not a speculative trade, but everything. They bought relentlessly, stacking physical bars, loading armored trucks, renting warehouses. They accumulated around 200 million ounces, half of it in actual metal, the other half in futures contracts that gave them claims on even more. Their thesis was simple. Governments can print currency, but they cannot print silver. As the brothers bought, the price responded. $6, $10, $20, $40. In one electrifying year, silver shot up over 700%. On paper, the Hunts became some of the richest men in America, but their genius contained a fatal flaw. They trusted leverage and paper pathways inside a system that would never willingly allow them to win. Every futures contract they controlled was a promise by the exchange to deliver metal if they demanded it. And they started demanding. Vaults began to empty. Quiet meetings were held in New York boardrooms. Regulators, bankers, and exchange officials all stared at the same terrifying possibility. If the brothers insisted on taking delivery on all their contracts, the exchange would fail. So the rules changed. Overnight. A new regulation. No new long positions. You could sell, you could hold, but you could not buy more. Margin requirements exploded. The very platform that had enticed the Hunts with leverage turned around and weaponized that leverage against them. Forced to raise hundreds of millions just to keep their positions, they scrambled. As they sold, others panicked and followed. The price cratered in a single brutal day, now known as Silver Thursday. Fortunes evaporated. The Hunts were ruined. Yet in the middle of that chaos, one group quietly came out ahead. People who owned physical silver outright, with no debt, no leverage, no margin calls. They did not have to sell. They did not care what arbitrary rule the exchange announced. The lesson was written in blood and bankruptcy filings. You cannot win a rigged game using the game's own tools. Fast forward to the present, and the scoreboard looks eerily familiar. Except this time, the players are global, and the stakes are much higher. For decades, the silver market has run on an unspoken assumption that most futures traders will never ask for delivery. On paper, Comex reports hundreds of millions of ounces available. But buried in the fine print is a smaller, more important number. Registered ounces, metal actually designated as ready for delivery. That number has been sliding like an elevator whose cables just snapped. In early October 2024, around 80 million ounces sat in the registered category. By December 2025, that figure had almost halved. Not because people were taking profits, but because more and more entities were standing for delivery, saying, "Send me the bars." On a single November day, over 6 million ounces reportedly left the system. At the same time, data from the largest silver ETFs show inflows, but their own prospectuses quietly admit they can settle in cash if physical metal is unavailable. In South Korea, banks with global reach throw up their hands and stop selling silver to the public. In China, regulators reclassify precious metals risk and slam the door on retail physical buying through the banks, even as state entities quietly accumulate. In India, import data spikes as citizens who have lived through multiple currency crises vote with their savings and buy silver by the container load. Overlay that with industrial demand and the picture sharpens into something alarming. The solar industry alone now eats double-digit percentages of annual silver supply. Electric vehicles use significantly more silver than old combustion engines. 5G towers, medical equipment, AI data centers. Every innovation headline hides another silent claim on future ounces. Meanwhile, mine supply has stagnated or declined. Recycling cannot bridge the gap. Industry bodies speak blandly of annual deficits, measured in the tens or hundreds of millions of ounces, as if deficits can continue forever without consequence. Then comes the sign no honest market should flash: backwardation. Spot silver trades above futures, meaning the cost of immediate physical delivery exceeds the cost of a future promise. That is what markets looked like in previous squeezes: in gold when foreign central banks demanded bars, in palladium when Russian shipments mysteriously slowed. It is the telltale footprint of stage 3. The squeeze is on, and the system is quietly running out of road. This is the part of the story where most people tune out, assuming there will always be another dip to buy, another chance to reposition. But the pattern does not care about anyone's comfort. Stage 4, the break, does not arrive as gentle volatility. It arrives as a sudden series of temporary measures that somehow become permanent. First come the trading halts, officially blamed on technical issues or cooling failures at massive data centers engineered to military standards. Then come sharp increases in margin requirements, making it brutally expensive to hold long futures. Then come position limits, new rules that cap how much physical you are even allowed to demand. Finally, buried in legal language, comes the pivot: cash settlement in place of delivery. You still get paid in the same paper currency everyone is trying to escape. Meanwhile, in the real world, dealers quietly raise premiums. $5 over spot becomes 20, then 50. One day you hear that major mints are booked out for the year. Another day you discover your local bullion shop has a waiting list instead of inventory. Headlines scream about skyrocketing nominal prices, but paradoxically, the true problem is not the number on the screen. It is the absence of metal at any reasonable price. At that point, all the arguments about whether silver should be $20, $40, or $60 become meaningless. The only question that matters is, do you have any? That is why the final chapter of this pattern is not about trading, but about preparation. It is about understanding the difference between speculation and ownership. Speculation is renting exposure to a price chart through paper products. Ownership is taking a portion of your savings, 10, 15, maybe 20%, and converting it into recognizable liquid forms of metal you can actually hold. Coins, bars, from mints and refiners everyone trusts. It is about storing that metal in ways that minimize counterparty risk. A safe you control, a vault where you hold the key, arrangements that do not rely on someone else's promise in a crisis. The clock is ticking louder with every inventory drawdown, every trading halt, every sign that the paper game is straining under its own leverage. History is clear. Every fiat currency dies. Every debt-drunk system resets. And every time, the people who recognized the pattern early walked into the storm with something tangible, while others clutched contracts and promises that evaporated. The question now is not whether silver will move. It is whether you will act while the window is still open or stand with the crowd later, wondering how it closed so fast.